And now, the harrowing conclusion to Into the Blender. Somewhere, light years beyond anywhere, Inferno, Lignius, Bijou, and Echo Android were dutifully posted around the Mason's oversized cooking pot. The Mason and Doug, with Felix and Felicity, could already see the twin white and violet stripes leaving colored trails through the cosmos as they raced to their location. The Mason spoke. "I've nearly forgotten how fast our girls move when they wanted to." In agreement, Doug replied, "Indeed." Felix and Felicity bounced up and down with excitement, yet holding their words. Presently, Zmai and Sarkany flew in and, hovering, commanded the airspace above the cooking pot. Each massive dragon then lowered their necks and snouts over the pot, and all four riders were jettisoned as they remained hovering over the contents of the pot. Zmai, with her deep, dusty violet scales, then took her place next to Doug. Sarkany, with her brilliant white and rainbowed scales, took her place next to the Mason. Brilliant white light streamed around each dragon, so brilliant, in fact, that the light reduced their forms imperceptible, and when the light subsided, two women now stood with luxurious gowns, one dusty violet and the other white, accented by a rainbow of color. The Mason greeted the woman next to him, saying, "Lulia, my beloved." Doug greeted the woman next to him, saying, "My wise and beautiful Amethysta." Felix and Felicity, no longer restraining themselves, bounced up and down and shouted around and over everyone, saying, "It's Mom and Aunt Lulia." As greetings and embraces were exchanged as they came round to Amethysta and Felicity, the missing limb was quickly noticed, and Felicity blurted out, "Mom, guess what? Dad let Felix and I play as the Wampus Cat." Doug and Amethysta exchanged glances as she said, "Oh, child." Felicity struck a fierce pose and stated, "It's okay, Mom. I adapted. I don't even miss it now." Patting Felix's and Felicity's heads, Lulia said, "Our guests need tending, young ones." The group of six formed a line facing the Mason's massive cooking pot and the motley quartet hovering above it. Julie, carrying Lucas Green in a flight suit, who herself appeared to have been through a war, with her clothes very much destroyed, torn or burned, and the majority of her skin suit melted and hanging in loops and strands, exposing her pink metallic android hull. Jane, carrying Shadow Lucas in a flight suit, who herself was still wearing full snow gear, 3 large black duffel bags, and the unloaded shotgun, and drag lines in the grease paint in her face from her fingers, and her left palm skin torn away. Amethysta and Lulia both leaned forward of the line, making eye contact with the rest of the group, who reciprocated each in turn. The Mason spoke first. "Well, it looks like you all have had quite the little adventure." Julie confidently went next, saying, "With no small errand accomplished, we present you Lucas Green for fixing." "Young android," said Lulia, "Lucas Green is human and cannot merely be fixed. None among us have that power." Jane and Julie looked at each other in disbelief over these words, and in the moment they realized that Lucas was passed out, but Shadow Lucas was alert because he was slowly and maniacally laughing. Amethysta now spoke. "Aquan android, where is the binding agent? Surely, if you are here now with a human, it must be at Death's prompting. Have you not followed Death's instructions fully?" Jane recounted to the group that during the meeting in the destroyed office, she had only sensed the undeniable presence of Death, and his words were relayed to her through others. All 6 in the group displayed varying physical or audible signs of discomfort. Shadow Lucas looked straight up at Jane and commented, "You blundering blimp." Felix and Felicity covered their mouths with all three of their hands to stifle their laughter. "Please," Jane pleaded. "This is the naughty one. The truth is I care for them both very deeply. Lucas is so kind and nice and wonderful." Shadow Lucas broke in over Jane, ranting, "I am not nice, I am not kind, and I am not wonderful." Jane explained, "See, he cares for me too. He only acts naughty because he's broken. He's not bad." Jane paused and swallowed hard before continuing. "Please, he is my most favorite person ever." With that, one fat, sparkling, pure, clear tear fell out of Jane's eye and dared to venture down her face, twice down and over ridges of grease paint from the valleys in her skin where she had ripped from before, and they fell directly into the Mason's cooking pot, exactly at the time that Jane said, "I love him." Brilliant white light began streaming upward from the massive cooking pot, and Julie, Jane, and both Lucases were supported in midair by an unseen force. Amethysta and Lulia stepped forward to the cooking pot. The four androids guarding the pot dispersed as Amethysta said, "Gather, everyone." The Mason, Doug, Felix, and Felicity all surrounded the pot, dipped their hands, and disturbed the contents of the pot. The light emanating from the pot grew in brilliance and intensity, slowly causing Jane, Julie, and Shadow Lucas's field of vision to be completely saturated with pure white light. In turn also, all four of their physical forms were enveloped in light so that the group of six could no longer see Julie, Jane, or either Lucas's. The light from the pot maintained its strength for a short while and then softened and eventually went out. The family of six, now reunited, left the cooking pot and the four androids returned guard. Much discussion, embracing, reminiscing, and outpourings of gratitude and love were shared. The last thing Jane remembered as the brilliance of the light overtook everything were firstly Doug's voice saying, "The light shineth in darkness, and the darkness comprehended it not." And lastly, from her time in Kyoto, Jane's happy thought returned one final time. Much later, and somewhere light years from anywhere, Lulia was inspecting the Mason's oversized cooking pot and said out loud, "Such debris!" Finding Doug and the Mason engaged in a game of hyperplane chess with Felix and Felicity, cheering them on, Lulia stated, "Mason, your toy maker is unsightly and disgusting." The Mason leaned around Doug with wide eyes, wildly gesturing to both Doug and the hyperplane board. Lulia turned to leave, saying it would be a pity if something were to happen to that nasty old thing. The Mason scrambled up from his current position, pointing at Felix and Felicity, saying, "Kids, take over for me." Preparing for this enormous endeavor, the Mason debriefed Inferno, Lignius, Bijou, and Echo on their roles in scouring the pot. The Mason and the four androids quickly got to work removing the loose items first and then disposing of them. Each android used their unique abilities to loosen and remove more difficult stuck-on items, such as a whale skeleton that was this big. Trash soon piled up, and Inferno and Echo cooperated to incinerate the refuse. Bijou brought 3 unknown items directly to the Mason for inspection, asking, "What are these?" Bijou was carrying Jane's 3 large black duffel bags. The Mason told Bijou, "Open an inventory, please." Bijou went through the first 2 bags, and the Mason rejected every item as obsolete or useless, and they were all turned over to Inferno or Echo to incinerate. As Bijou opened the 3rd duffel bag, a familiar scent emanated upwards. Lignius android said, "That smell. What is that, Bijou? Asked the mason. Stretching the zipper open wide, Bijou stated, It's all paper. Do you want me to give... Lignius and the mason at the same time spoke. Comic books! This was Jane's handiwork from when she was in the vault under Atro City. The mason was moved indeed, and thought a thought to himself so as not to cause jealousy among the androids. I always knew she was my favorite. It was summer on Earth 4. A 1966 Shelby GT350 could be seen headed north towards Roswell. Lucas Green, wearing his hair with two small blonde spikes in front, was driving. Jane Rask, in a t-shirt and cutoff shorts, her long raven-like hair blowing wildly next to the open window, said to Lucas, I cannot believe you blew up your shop. Lucas weakly replied, yeah. Jane looked across at the speedometer, which gauged at 114 miles per hour, prompting her to ask Lucas, Can you slow down, please? Calmly, Lucas replied, Yes, I can, and accelerated to 130. Jane turned to Lucas and said, You were pretty sassy today. Are you sure you're feeling okay? Lucas grinned, right as rain. Jane's one eyebrow was cocked upward as she said, Okay. By the way, I wasn't asking you to slow down for me. Lucas immediately and safely slowed to 90 miles an hour. Parking outside the diner was scarce, as it had been over the past year become a tourist hotspot as the lore leading up to the ruination of the foundry was more popular than UFOs. Lucas pulled the glass door open, and all conversation switched to murmurings. As Jane stepped around Lucas and through the glass door frame, every customer in the diner erupted with questions and requests for pictures and signatures. Jane and Lucas obliged and eventually seated themselves at Agent 3's table, which was permanently reserved. Julie bopped up to the table and said, Hi guys, what do you want? And snapped her pink gum. Jane smiled. Bubs, we're famished. Anything. Just bring everything. Julie pointed finger guns at Lucas and Jane and shouted, Earl, breakfast for the two big shots. Lucas leaned into Jane's shoulder, and as Julie walked away, he said, You know, that unloaded shotgun in the snow was a huge calculated risk. Smiling, Jane said, I know. Lucas blew softly at her earlobe and said, I want to be as cool as you when I grow up. Well, replied Jane, you are never going to grow up, so that's one less thing for us to worry about. And Jane booped Lucas's nose. Julie served a large spread of food, with Lucas drinking coffee and Jane drinking juice. Presently, the small bell on the front door chimed, and 12 Foundry Enforcer agents filed into the already cozy diner. Each were wearing heavy boots, monochromatic black uniforms, full tactical gear with body armor and helmets, and carrying automatic weapons. Some customers panicked, and Julie and Earl tried calming them as Lucas and Jane calmly ate their food. Moving through the Enforcer agents, Opal Rinderpest presented herself in front of Lucas and Jane's table. Swallowing a swig of juice, Jane winced and said, Do you have an appointment? Opal spoke in a very official tone, stating, Lucas Green, Jane Rask, also known as the Aquan Android, I am placing both of you under arrest. Whoa, 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 said Jane through a mouthful of bacon and using the uneaten part as a pointing device at Opal's face. I am no longer the Aquan Android. My happy thought came true. Opal cleared her throat, saying, The Foundry has looked everywhere for you two. Lucas put his hand up to one ear as if he were hard of hearing and said, Everywhere? Perhaps you should have looked every when. Customers were now taking photos. Jane, still eating while talking, said, "You didn't try very hard, Opal." Opal Rinderpest straightened up, saying, "There was no trace of you two, across planets or across time circuits." Jane again sipped her juice and winced, saying, "You still haven't learned, Opal. Constant control leads to constantly being surprised and offended when your plans fail. Life is about relationship, and being right is less important than the relationship itself. Life is about adapting, burning bridges." Jane scooted her chair backwards, and Lucas reached out to her arm, and she covered his hand with her hand. With the grace, ferocity, and strength of a lioness, Jane Rask stood up, displaying her recently pregnant figure, saying, "Burning bridges and building new ones. We're done, Opal. We used to work for you, and I know exactly how many friends you have," she said, pointing at all the enforcers, "and this is not all of them. I'm surprised you can still afford to pay these gentlemen." She looked at an enforcer and said, "Sir, what does your benefit package look like? Speaking of friends, Opal, bring all your friends. You would do well to remember how big my friends are." Jane returned to her chair, and the customers erupted in cheering. Opal restated, "You both are under arrest." Zap, bip, snap. With that, the 1966 Shelby GT350, Lucas Green, and Jane Rask all vanished without a trace.